Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining us today. I'm going to give a minute for everyone to get settled. And while you're doing that, I want to welcome you to our webinar, Finishing the Semester in the Wake of COVID-19. My name is Amanda, and I'm the project director of the team that is representing this webinar today. But your primary presenter will be Michelle, who I will be introducing shortly. Next slide. So thanks again for joining us today, guys. I also wanted to take a minute to shout out our funders and our organization, UMass Medical School. Our funder, Neidler, has supported us to provide these webinars, and we're really thankful to have them, or else we wouldn't be here today. Next slide. So quick housekeeping. I think at this point, 5 weeks into this work from home chaos in Massachusetts, and for those of you nationally, probably even longer, um, quick housekeeping on webinars. You've probably been on a ton. We are going to be recording this webinar and posting it on our website. We'll be sharing the link to that in the chat feature shortly in case you don't have enough time to jot it down, but it is on the slide. We're also providing live captions today. There's a link there as well, and it has already been shared in the chat for those of you who need live captions. Because of the large number of audience attendees, we are automatically muting everyone when you join. However, we do ask that you utilize the chat feature and the questions section, which I'll show you briefly on the screen in a minute, in order to get all of your questions addressed. This will be a large question and answer session that we want to make sure that we're addressing everything that people are on and live and want to know. If you're having any tech issues, our wonderful support from our communications division, Dee Logan, has her email listed at the bottom of this screen. So you can email her, or you can just drop something in the chat or question session to get your questions answered. So what you might be seeing on your screen is, to the right-hand side, the panel of your options to join from computer or phone audio. Sometimes if there's a lot of attendees, people have struggle with their computer audio, so feel free to jump on your phone line. Make sure to put in your phone PIN so that we can appropriately mute you should we have any background noise. On this screen is the bottom of your panel, which is the questions section. That's where you can drop any and all questions you have for Michelle. We will be facilitating a question and answer for a large portion of the end of this webinar, but also throw your questions in during any point as they come up if Michelle touches on something that you want to hear more about, or if you just have general questions she hasn't yet answered. We want this to be very interactive as much as possible. So who are we? Where is this webinar coming from? We are the Transitions to Adulthood Center for Research. We're a national center through UMass Medical School in Massachusetts that aims to improve the lives of young adults with lived mental health experience. And the purpose of this webinar is really to focus on a subset of our population, helping college students and managing their mental health. Next slide. Your presenter today, as I referenced, the wonderful Michelle Mullen, is the developer of HYPE, Helping Youth on the Path to Employment, which is a college-supported education and supported employment blended model, aka it's a model to support students being academically successful while managing their mental health on campus. So she will be kind of walking you through some content today from her 17 plus years of experience working in this field to support students and beyond. What is HYPE? As I referenced, HYPE stands for Helping Youth on the Path to Employment, and it's all about focusing on supporting young adults' careers and prioritizing education early. And that's why this topic is really relevant and important to our entire team who supports HYPE. As I referenced, HYPE blends school and work supports. And if you want to learn more about HYPE, next slide. Thank you. You can visit us at umassmed.edu/hype, and we'll also throw that link into the chat for you as well. We're here to help. Anything that comes up that you're interested in learning more about, just shoot us an email or visit our website. So with that, I want to pop a quick poll up on the page while I turn this over to Michelle to better understand a little bit of who is on the line. We originally created this presentation for college students, but we realized that a lot of people beyond just college students have joined the webinar. So if you could take a second right now to click on the button that best identifies who you are representing, that would be lovely. I'm going to give everyone about 15 more seconds. Looks like we're getting a lot of responses in.
Awesome, love that. Thank you, Amanda.
Of course.
Now, I can't really see. Am I still sharing my screen?
No, Michelle, the poll takes over the whole screen, so it momentarily
Okay.
blocks your content.
And
Thank you.
Amanda and Michelle, this is Debbie. We're having a bit of an audio problem, we think. So we may want to give the poll another half a minute.
Okay. We've had around 80% of the audience participate, so I'll give it one more minute and then I think we should be good to go. Yeah, we have greater than 80% participation. So to break it down, Michelle, we had 40% of the group representing college administrators or college staff, about a quarter of the group representing college students, and 20% of the group, or the rest of the group, as other providers, meaning non-campus providers or beyond.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate that. So the design of this webinar is for college students. So for the number of you who are college students, this is for you. We recognize that there are a lot of resources for lots of different types of people to support college students and other folks going through this COVID crisis and how they're managing. But we also recognize there wasn't a lot for college students. So we thought that we would do this to help college students figure out how to finish the semester. I'm sorry, I'm having a couple of technical difficulties on my side. Okay, so for today's discussion, we wanted to start with some things that we wanted for college students to consider. We wanted to talk about how to figure out your day, some time and task management, some motivating and managing your emotions, navigating school and getting what you need, and some resources. We also want to have a lot of time for question and answer. So I'll try not to do too much talky and get to those as well. So I wanted to make a special note. We have an advisory board of college students who have lived experience, mental health conditions, and we brought the topic to that group this week, and we had asked, like, okay, so what do you guys need to hear from people? What would be some helpful things? And they had provided such amazing feedback. You know, part of our work here is partnering with young adults, college students, and otherwise to find out how we can best meet their needs. So I just want to give a big thanks to them. If any of the college students on this call are interested in participating in the future, we would be happy to hear from you. So please give us a shout at our website below, and presumably Amanda's already putting it in the chat. So don't be shy. We would love to grow our student advisory board. So I thought that it was helpful to start in the way of validating college students' feelings. So I'm a college student currently too. I'm trying to finish my semester in the wake of COVID, so this is really relatable for me. But everyone is struggling right now. So everyone is, and everyone struggles differently. And I think this is different in that you did not ask for this. This is super hard. It's not your fault. You didn't say to your professor, you know what, I'm actually going to leave campus early and do all of my work remotely. So would you mind putting your class online? And would you mind trying to teach this class that's usually in person, you know, remotely? We didn't ask for this. And so this is hard for everyone. It's hard on professors. It's hard on you. It's hard on the people that love you and support you. But I just want for folks to know that you should not feel responsible for feeling like this is hard. It is hard on everyone, and you didn't ask for it, so it's not your fault. When we spoke to our advisory board, they were like, this is like a really important thing for me to keep in mind, is that I don't have to feel bad that I am asking for things because I didn't actually ask for this. This happened to me, and we're all trying to figure out how to move forward. The other thing that I want for you to consider is that everyone's heart is different. It doesn't make it more hard or less hard. Everyone's heart is hard. So we're going to talk a little bit today about how do you find what is hard, And can you figure out what's causing the hard? And if we can figure it out, like what's the cause of the difficulty, then perhaps we can find a solution. We also want to share some resources at the end that may be able to help, and hopefully our discussion will help a bit in how do we navigate and finish the rest of the semester. So we thought that we would start with kind of like figuring out your days, because working remotely in either a place that you live by yourself or with roommates that you may or may not like, or going home to family members who you may or may not get along with, is all a very difficult type of thing. And so your pre-COVID days don't look like your COVID days. I don't know if anyone else can hear that. Good. So what we thought we would try to do is figure out how you can structure your day to make it more possible to get your work done, and to kind of figure out like how do you intersperse things that make you happy and positive with the things that make you productive to be able to finish your day. So some of the things to figuring out your day, which is could be helpful, is thinking about making a list of all the things that you can do now, not before COVID and social distancing and self-quarantining and nothing being open. But how do you make yourself happy in this context? And so some thoughts from some other folks have been like not dwelling too much on what used to bring you happiness or what you've lost from COVID, because we're kind of here now. So being able to say like, what should I be doing now? So making a list of the things that bring you some happiness or some type of positive feelings. Also identifying things that make you feel energized or recharged, like how do I do this and what do I have to kind of like intersperse into my day? And then this idea of like recreating wellness. So what does it look like now? Wellness before COVID may not look like wellness currently. Is my well now? And so what are the strategies we can put into place? And so this may actually be an opportunity for some people to develop some strategies that they may not have had before. We know that physical and mental wellness increases academic wellness. So actually some light exercise or moving around is really a great cognitive remediation intervention. So it improves people's ability to think and perform. So even if walking wasn't your thing or running wasn't your thing or bike riding, there are some benefits in thinking about like what can you do now to kind of energize and refocus and feel like partly human, because that's hard too. So a lot of students have asked like, how am I supposed to get this stuff done? Like I'm at home, my day has completely changed, my life has completely changed. And so figuring about like how do you structure your day? And there are a couple of things that I think it's helpful for people to know. Now, some of this takes a little bit of practice and some takes a little bit of self-discipline, or at least just like some self-structuring, which is related to identifying what are your productive and non-productive times. So productive times where you can get stuff done pretty easily or more easily than during non-productive times. So you have this oomph that you can get things done with not a lot of effort, or at least not as much effort as it takes during non-productive times. And then being able to figure out when you do your work and when you don't. So sometimes people think like I have to work all day to get stuff done, even through your non-productive times. Like I can't work late at night. I just can't do it. Regardless if I do it or not, like the amount of return, like what I can generate from that time is often so much effort for not a lot of work done, but it depletes my emotional and my energy store. So I just feel like garbage, and I feel worse about myself because I couldn't figure out how to get stuff done. So identifying your productive and non-productive times, and then figuring out how you waste time. So we were on the call with our advisory board earlier in the week, and one of the college students on that board was like, I just want to sit around and watch Netflix, right? So like relatable. We do want to do that. So this is one of those things that are like wasted time, right? So like we're not getting anything done. You're probably, if you haven't done other work before that, you're probably thinking like, I really should be doing work. That doesn't really help so much because it's not your free time. So figuring out how you waste time. This doesn't just have to be Netflix, but it also could be like checking your email incessantly, or when you're trying to get some work done, like going to Instagram and scrolling for a little while, which then turns out to be a long while. So figuring out what you do even during your productive times that gets in the way of getting your stuff done. So the idea is that we want to use productive time to really focus in on work, and our non-productive time to refuel ourselves, so whatever that means. And then when you identify a little bit of structure, what are your productive times and non-productive times, then we can start to stitch together a day that is both flexible with downtime, productive time, like wellness time, and things that we're not actually, when we don't have to think about school. Now, we are about to enter into finals, and that is a very stressful time, particularly during COVID. So structuring your time when you don't have classes also is as important as structuring your time during the last weeks of classes. Next week is my last week of school, and then we move into finals. I know that some schools go a little bit longer. So then how do we work from home? Some of us do this. And some of us don't, right? But spending all of your time at the computer is sometimes productive and sometimes it's not productive. So, home used to be a place where people went to decompress and to relax, and this is your home. You're not in class, you're not on campus, you're not interfacing with faculty or professors or deans or your internship supervisors. But now it's compressing, right? You have to do all of your work, everything, both personal and work-wise, from home. And so then it starts to kind of like squeeze in on you. And this idea of being housebound is a real thing. So figuring out like, okay, productive times, non-productive times, when do I have to like have my best concentration, what type of work, and what other type of work does it need my most of my concentration. So thinking about what spaces you can use at your house. So some things I believe are best done at a table. Other things you can do in your couch, other things you can do from your bed, but not all places are created equal. So I took a class this semester that was a web-based class, so it didn't actually have to be migrated, but they were videos from my professor, and he had a very soothing, calming voice. And I realized really early on I could not lay in bed at the end of the day and listen to these lectures, which I found were super interesting because his tone was so melodic that I would fall asleep within like a couple minutes. I actually started to use it instead of learning as a sleep aid because sometimes I have difficulty falling asleep. So I knew if I turned this on, I would be asleep. So it became something else, but that is not when I learned about the content lecture. So when thinking about how do you get stuff done, work at the space that's productive for that task. I can't write like focusedly on a couch or in bed. I can do it at a table because it provides some structure for me. So thinking about what are the things that you get done best, not the things that you like the best. Because if we all did the things that we liked, we probably wouldn't be in the same situation. So being able to figure out what makes me most productive, because the idea is that we want to finish classes and we don't want to work all day, every day, burning the candle on both sides. The other thing that we want to think about when working from home is how do we minimize our internal and external distractions. So internal distractions could be like, oh, I have to do this, or I'm thinking about, one of my friends who said something like this last night. And our external distractions could be things like our cell phones. That is a really significant external distraction, or your little sister who you're now living with because you couldn't go back to campus. So thinking about how we minimize those distractions, and so thinking about how we put down our cell phones or try to find space from our little sister, or to do a to-do list, which we'll talk a lot about. We see in research, which I don't know if anyone is particularly interested in, but that setting goals is super helpful to being able to stay on task. So daily, weekly, and end of semester goals. So we're really close to end of semester goals, and I presume if you're on this call that you want to finish the semester. So figuring out what our daily goals are and our weekly goals helps us to kind of stay on task. So we'll talk a little bit about that again in a couple minutes. And often these little changes, these little tweaks, like, all right, I work best in the morning, even though I don't like it. So I'm going to get up, I'm going to get my computer on the kitchen table, and I'm going to pour my cup of coffee and start with this paper, right? I always start with my to-do list, but when I start to do my work, I do this. So it's like one foot in front of the other. Small changes compile into larger changes. And all of these things are going to be different for different people, but thinking about the structure and how to think about it, you can create your own stitching of your day. So to be able to finish the semester, we think about both time management and task management. And if you ask any college student with a mental health condition, they will tell you time and task management, organization, and prioritizing are of the top barriers that we experience. And I would say arguably all college students everywhere struggle with this, largely because college professors assign more work than you can really accomplish, but there's also things that we have to produce at the end. So for time management, we're really talking about how much time do I have, how much time will it take, and what time do I start and what time do I end. And so some people are real time management folks, whereas task management is a little bit different. Task management is what do I have to do, when do I have to get it done, and what's the priority. So if you think about yourself and you are time driven, you are a time management person. If you think about yourself and you think like, that drives me banana bonkers, I could never say I'm going to start at 1 and end at 3, you are a task manager. So figuring out what you are, but also trying to blend the two, a super helpful strategy, because most successful people mix both. But for now, we're not going to teach a lot about time and task management, but what we are going to do is focus on strategies that will help finish, largely by focusing on task management. Because as you folks know, as we enter into the end of the semester, it really is about completing, right? So it's getting the papers done on time, getting the group projects done on time, showing up for your final. It's about demonstration and deadline. So we don't have the luxury, a lot of us, to be able to negotiate those things. So right now, arguably, task management is the most important. So if I were to think about calendaring and to-do lists, I think that they are both incredibly important, and I would be lost without my calendar. For those of you college students that don't use a calendar, I would suggest considering one because it's super helpful. But if you don't use a to-do list, then you definitely want to start doing that. If not just to get through COVID, but also as a technique of how do you manage moving forward. So calendars help you to kind of visualize how much time you have. So if you're a task manager person, you really need to figure out how much time do you have to work with. If you're a time manager person, then calendars are perfect because you can just like schedule away. Calendars are helpful because it gives you these like blocks of time where you're supposed to do things. It reminds you if you use electronic calendar. If you use a paper calendar, it's a good reminder just to write it down. It helps to remember. But calendars require upkeep. Totally worth it, but it's something that you have to invest in. And for some people, they integrate their to-do list into their calendar. Other people, task managers, would hate this because in a calendar, you say, I'm going to do something at 1, I'm going to do something at 3, I'm going to do something at 4, I'm going to do something at 5. Whereas a task manager thinks like, okay, I have from 1 to 5 to do these types of things. So depending on your personality style, depends on the approach that you use. I would argue if we were working together that we would use both, but that's for another time. So this is what a calendar could look like, right? Where you have your big chunks of things in there. Your classes are in there, your meetings are in there, your prep time is in there. So this is what a calendar could look like. And yes, this is actually my calendar from March, I think. I thought that it was a good example of what my life as an employee as well as a student looks like. So blending the time management across school and work is really important because in our research, most of the students with mental health conditions that go to college also work. So being able to manage the expectations of both is super important. To-do lists, however, are very, very different, and I would say critical. So to-do lists help you to be like really focused on what you need to do today. So I suggest doing a daily and weekly to-do list. So a weekly is kind of like, what do I have to get done this week? And then plotting out what could happen on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Whereas a daily to-do list reminds you of what's happening in the week that you have to accomplish, but what are the tasks that you need to get done on that day to be able to gain traction for the next day, so that by the end of the week, it's culminated in what you have to get done. So by doing one every day, you're taking the things that you didn't get done from the previous day and rolling it into the next day. What we also ask you to think about is, why do you have to get it done? So hopefully these things are important, right? So you can't self-negotiate out of it like, oh, I can do that next week, but figuring out like, how do you get this larger project done? So we approach this really by doing task chunking. So how do you take something really big and break it down into smaller parts so it feels manageable? Because if I think about, oh, I have to write a 15-page paper, that feels very overwhelming to me. But if I think like, okay, I have to find sources, I have to write the intro, I have to sketch out like an outline, those things feel a little bit more manageable to me. So it's, how do you take the bigger assignment and break it into smaller parts? Your to-do list can also be super helpful in kind of managing your internal distractions. So if you have a thought of like, oh, I have to do this, instead of interrupting you writing that intro to your paper, what you do is you write it on your to-do list so that you don't forget it, because that's really a risk, right? But when a thought comes to you that you have to do something that's urgent or important, you write it down. And so then when you're finished kind of your work stream on the intro or whatever else you're working on, then you can move back to your to-do list and be like, oh yeah, I have to send that email out, or I have to call my mom, or whatever the case may be. So if you don't use a to-do list now, I think this is the most important thing that you can do, just to get some kind of like physical and mental organization, right? If you have like a template of what you have to accomplish in the day, it eliminates the static of all the other things that you have to do. So create a plan. And so in our discussion with our advisory board, they had said, it would be really cool if you could just give people a template. Now, there's lots of them on the website. I use a piece of paper that's in a book. Like, so this is my little book and my to-do list. And so I keep it like that. But we have this template for our intervention hype that allows you to kind of block out like the things that you need to accomplish in the week. So it kind of grounds you in what you have to get done, and then the things that you have to do today. And so on this example, this day was Monday. So it bulks out like, okay, so what are those task chunks that we just talked about? And then what are the things that I need to do for me and my happiness? And so what I've been doing a lot is going for walks to break up my day. Because sitting in my house as a break has not been very relaxing. So but thinking about what you need to do, on my walks, I see young people outside playing bago, listening to music outside. So it doesn't have to be something, physical, but thinking about what you do to make yourself happy and figuring out how you're going to fit that into your to-do list is super important, and breaking up your day so it accomplishes that.
Michelle, this is Amanda.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. If you don't mind going back to that slide, we actually had a great question that I thought might be helpful to have this content posted when it's asked. Someone said, I find my ever-growing to-do lists overwhelming. It's discouraging to see I am falling behind. How can I negate this? And I just think this breakout slide is super helpful for that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, because it does feel overwhelming. And so I think that is the point of a daily to-do list instead of a weekly to-do list or an ever-growing to-do list. So figuring out like, what are the things that are due that week, and just focus on that. So it's like almost like task chunking too, right? It's like one foot in front of the other. So if I were to make a to-do list of all the things I would have to get done, I would look like that cat on the computer. I would go to sleep. That is the way that I manage stress. I get incredibly tired, and like all systems like shut down. So somehow I convince myself that I have to go to bed, and nap is fine. I have the time for it. It's not. I don't have the time for it. It's not okay. So thinking about a daily to-do list, it really makes you be myopic, because it is very, very easy to be overwhelmed. Now, If your daily to-do list even looks like that, then there may be some elements when we can talk about, like, well, are there some accommodations that we can ask for? Like, is extended time helpful? Is the time now the issue, or is it the approach to the task? So for any college students that want to chime in too here about that, but if we focus on daily, then that helps to narrow. It's like putting the blinders on a horse, right? They don't see the things that are around them. So working hard to kind of focus on, like, what do I need to do today? And by doing stuff today, it actually helps to do things tomorrow because I got some things crossed off. And so what I also suggest for people not to do is don't put a ton on your to-do list. Don't put like the nice things like, oh, if I get this done today, that would be great. If you get done with your to-do list in the day and you still have energy, then think about your to-do list for tomorrow and plop something on there. If I find myself doing something that's not on my to-do list, I have to ask myself two things. Should I be doing this now? And if the answer is yes, no, if the answer is no, then I stop doing it. I put it on my to-do list for tomorrow because that's what I have is like for later. But if the answer is yes, I just forgot to put it on, I actually create another box on my to-do list and write it in because then I get to scratch it out. Like at the end of the day, I think like, oh, I got that done too. So this is also super helpful to show yourself that you're getting stuff done. So I don't know if that was helpful or not, but hopefully it was. Anyone feel like this? Like I think about it all the time. But I actually don't do a lot of it. So sometimes this is what happens when our emotions, get to us, right? So, so often getting started is the hardest thing to do. To-do lists are helpful because it makes it feel a little bit more manageable. But starting by hands down is the worst thing to do. The anticipation is usually worse than the actual activity. It causes torture, right? Thinking about it, that red pie chart with a little slice of blue, that's the torture that college students experience when trying to think about, oh, how on earth am I going to get this done? So when we think about how do we develop and maintain motivation, it's a really hard thing to do. So some people are really goal motivated, and so keeping the goal in mind is helpful. But other of us need more help than that. And so I recommend using a group accountability plan. So this is what business folks call GAPs. And this is where you make you reach out to your friends or your family or any of your people. Some people use social media for this, and I'm cool with that. Like use your Instagram and set the goal for today. So I'm going to do this today, and I'm going to check in at 2 o'clock and let you know how things are going. So this is helpful because you're articulating it to someone else. They will motivate you. They will check in with you. All of us are struggling with this right now because it's not like we just chose to work from home. Like we can't go out. We can't see our friends. We can't see our people. So we have this like additional stress and social isolation components. So being able to call on your people virtually is really helpful. So some of my friends and I either text or we do like Zoom parallel play. So we'll open a Zoom screen and we'll have the video cameras up, but we won't talk. We'll just work and be like, yo, I'm having a hard time with this. Or like, I can't handle this anymore, right? So you can get to complain a little bit, but you also you have this kind of accountability that people are working with you. So if you haven't tried that already, that may be something helpful. We had chatted with some students that said like just being able to set the goal for the day with someone who cares about you. Someone had cited like their girlfriend is super helpful to be like, okay, these are the things I'm going to get done. Being able to say it out loud and being able to check in with someone because we don't have that now, right? Because we're not on campus. One of the things that you may want to consider is writing your goal down somewhere. So put it on a sticky note inside of your computer or put it on your fridge. Like, I'm doing this to get through the semester. Once we get through the semester, it'll be better. I mean, literally the countdown to the end of the semester is real in my life for sure. So when we're thinking about motivation, often our emotions get the best of us. So I just have to give a shout out to my to my team members here. They were tasked with this, like making the presentation look fun and be fun. And so this was hilarious. Thank you guys. I appreciate you. So when we're thinking about motivation and managing our emotions, like this is a real thing, right? So we talk a lot about how do you maintain motivation, and that seems like, oh, great, an abstract thought of like, oh yeah, I'll just start working. But sometimes we have real emotions that get in the way of it. And so being able to just identify what it is, and to be able to identify what is the cause of the emotion can be helpful. So there's this kind of perspective of like the emotion that you're feeling is a snake that is wrapped around a tree branch that's hanging down, and you see the face of the snake. That's your emotion. But figuring out where the emotion comes from is the challenge, right? So is that the anger branch? Is it the sadness branch? Is it the resentfulness branch? Like, what is the actual cause of the emotion? And then if we can address what the issue is, right? So I'm feeling I'm feeling kind of lost, and I'm feeling lost because I don't have my academic tutor or my friends to help or any of my other resources. Then that's the issue, right? That we can then address. So when we think about this, like college students go from a resource-rich environment, one that has both people, places, technology, resources like tutoring services, labs, their faculty members, really, I mean, it's such a resource-rich environment that you then can't replicate from home, and you can't replicate in a community at this point because we can't go out. So then, how do we do that? So figuring out like what is the issue? Can we address the issue? Is there something else that we can ask for? So is it an accommodation, or do we have to reach out to our learning center and say, I used to get this on campus and I'm not getting this now. Like, how am I supposed to meet this need? Then that is a step that we can take to both advocate for ourselves as well as to make the campus aware that these are the resources and services that we have either been guaranteed or that have usually been a part of our college life. And then there's these other components, right? So what can we ask for and advocate for? What's the issue that's causing these emotions? And then what are the things that I can do to keep it at bay? So what usually helps to be able to keep either like regulate the emotion so I don't feel the ups and downs, and what are the self-care strategies? I also want to validate, though, that everyone is feeling ups and downs. So if you're one of those folks who think like it's because I have a mental health condition, I want to be able to argue at this point that yes, that's true. You may have a mental health condition, but everyone is experiencing these ups and downs, and it's hard for everyone. So being able to say like this is just a very difficult time for everyone may be helpful to you at this point. And your professors are also going through similar things, and they are probably very receptive to hearing about that if you're struggling in classes. So when we start to think about like, okay, so now we have to structure our day. We have to figure out when we're productive and not productive. We have to figure out our to-do list. We kind of have to apply some self-discipline or at least some structure around like I worked in my productive times, and during my non-productive times, I can fill it in with the things that make me happy or that kind of recharge me, or sleep. But then we also have to manage this online, right? We're moving to online. So once again, thanks for the funny meme. So this could be like the one person on in your class, or it could be your professor, which just has happened to me. But being able to figure out how to manage our online expectations, I think, is really important. Professors, I think, have been thrown into this situation. Well, not I think, they have definitely been thrown into the situation similar to us. So they had a week to prepare for their in-person classes to move to their online classes. And usually faculty on campus get a year to convert an in-person class to an online class. And so this is unfair to them, and they're struggling too, and it is very hard on them. So I think if we can share that kind of empathy with our faculty members, even though we are feeling compressed by the demand, it may be helpful in asking for what you need. We heard some feedback from our advisory board that to ensure that people are getting something out of the online classes, that faculty have inadvertently increased the work. So increased posts on discussion threads was one example where, you know, if I raise my hand in class, then that took me 5 seconds of my time. If I have to post a discussion, you know, thread and respond to other respondents, then that's an hour or two amount of work, especially if I'm not a good writer or I don't know what to say. And let's face it, as a college student, you would float off of other people's ideas in the classroom, right? So like if you didn't do all of the reading, you read some of it, someone says something, you're like, oh yeah, that was a really good point, right? So you may not have done all the reading, but on an online classroom, it makes it more difficult. So you are against like a very different set of expectations from the beginning of the semester to now. One of the things that I encourage for students to do is to better understand what their professor's priorities are. So is it that I come to class? Is it that I post? Is it that I reach out and tell you that I'm struggling to do these things? So understanding what the professor's priorities are can be a kind of a window into how you articulate your needs and what you prioritize getting things and how you prioritize getting things done. In our discussion earlier in the week with our advisory board, one student was like, you know what, my professor, I skipped a class so I can work on a paper to get that done because it was due at the end of the week. Lots of professors aren't taking attendance. So thinking about, I don't encourage people to skip class, but sometimes as a student, you have to juggle like what you need to get done. So thinking about what their priorities are, if they weight attendance as 40% or 50% of your grade, then you do want to go to class because then you can take a real ding on that. So we're going to talk a little bit about like asking for what you need kindly, because that may actually get you what you want. I think we're definitely going to talk about the resources posted later, but if you craft an email to your professor, you may want to start it with language like, I recognize that this is a hard time for you too, and this has been something that you aren't anticipating moving to this class to online. I wanted to be able to share my experience because I think that perhaps it may be helpful for you to hear from students about what this migration has done in both learning and demonstrating material. So in our resources, we'll talk about that in a little bit, but thinking about how you catch it may be super helpful. Oh, look, this is what I just said. Okay, so navigating your classes and getting what you need. So some of it is how you ask for things, but the other is that you have to figure out what you need. I think most schools at this point are going to pass-fail, so figuring out if your school offers it is really important. Also thinking about what are the consequences if you take a pass-fail. So for students who are at certain points in their college pursuits, so master's degrees, bachelor's degrees, it's a little bit different for students in their PhDs, but you may need certain classes to get into other programs, or if you want to move from a bachelor's degree to a master's degree, you have to think about, like, is this a required course and do they care a lot about this? The other thing that you may want to consider is if you're taking some classes pass-fail, but you want to take others for a grade, put your efforts towards the grades because that affects your GPA. Whereas the pass-fail, the pass does not affect your GPA, it stays as is. The fail obviously does affect your GPA. So getting to what the threshold is for pass, which is typically a C, may be easier than being able to get the A or the high B in a class where you have to demonstrate proficiency. So thinking about what pass-fail means, if any of you college students who are on this call are interested in learning more about that, put that in the chat function. We are curious about what other additional webinars you would be interested in. We can do like a little bit of topic and go pretty deep, and we can do it where we can have more discussion. So use the chat function to say what you need for sure here too. So pass-fail, one of the things that you should figure out if that is available at your school how and when you use it, as well as what type of extensions, accommodations, and should you need to ask for an incomplete. So for those of you who are taking classes that you need to get a grade in, but you cannot finish this semester, literally because of your constraints, then perhaps an incomplete is the best option. Work with your academic advisor related to this. We can also be helpful in thinking about how incompletes affect both future progress as well as impact to satisfactory academic progress. Thinking also about, are your individual assignments able to get extensions on them? So often finals, if you have to write a paper by X date, so like let's say May 6th, but grades don't go into May 21st, you may want to ask your professor, like, is it possible that I get a couple more weeks to finish the paper? I think professors are being really adaptable and flexible at this point, given that no one asked for this and it's no one's fault that this is happening. So, using that flexibility to your advantage, I think is very helpful. Thinking about how do you advocate for your needs? Lots of people feel really comfortable saying what they need, and some people are really skilled at it. They can say it in a way that people want to give them what they want. Other people may not be so skilled, but are not shy about asking, but they ask in a particular way that does not make people want to give them what they want. So how do you advocate for your needs, and who do you talk to, and how do you say it? These are all super important things. Often we have to find our advocates, right? So if I don't feel comfortable speaking up, maybe I have a professor who is happy to speak up on my behalf, or for the behalf of all students that are experiencing the same thing I'm experiencing. So find your advocates, your professors, your mentors, your deans, disability services, like literally anyone on campus can be an advocate for you. We do want to help to provide students with some advocacy, thinking about how can you ask for what you need. We think about this in like the honey first and the vinegar. So my mom used to say to me when I was younger, you get more bees with honey than with vinegar. And I used to respond like, what does that mean? Like, whatever, Mom. And like, I didn't really get it until I was older, right? Like, oh yeah, you're nice. People want to help nice people. So thinking about like how you craft your request, and how do you manage if you don't get the answer that you want? How do you manage the response to that? So I just want to make note, because some people are getting other people's anger, and so the way that people treat you is a reflection of them, and the way that you treat them is a reflection of you. So thinking about, if I was in this person's position and someone was asking me for something, how would I say yes to this? And using that to kind of craft your email or have a discussion with your professor. I think lots of professors want to be helpful. And I think how you engage and how you maintain that relationship is really important. So be kind, but also ask for what you need. So it's a kind of a balancing act. So the other people that are on campus that can be particularly helpful right now for college students with mental health conditions are our CAPS, as well as our accessibility and disability services. So CAPS is our counseling services. Lots of them are providing telehealth, webinars and tools to help manage wellness. I would encourage everyone reaching out to their office to see how they're making services available and what they're doing for students that are struggling, because every student is struggling. It's not just those mental health conditions. And then the other office that is like highly underused by college students with mental health conditions is the accessibility and disability services. Often college students tell us like, oh, I didn't realize that service was for me. I thought it was just for, the student who was blind or I was in a wheelchair, but accessibility, disability services are for anyone who has a condition that affects their ability to perform or to be able to have access to information and demonstrate information. So lots of students are scared with mental health conditions that disability services would disclose their condition to their professors. They can't. So they'll tell them like, hey, you're a student who's a student who's protected and a qualified student with disability. That's the language that they use. Often college students don't consider themselves disabled if they have a mental health condition. We struggle, or it's a bit of a battle sometimes, but often that language is reserved for other types of groups. So they guarantee protections for qualified students, and they don't disclose what your particular condition is. But they're really, really helpful with being creative and identifying academic accommodations and assistive technology that is specific to how your condition affects you. So, I think a part of the problem is that students who have bipolar, depression, or schizoaffective, like all of those folks are affected differently by their condition. So one person with bipolar looks very, very different than another person with it. So it's very hard to kind of have a straight line of accommodations or assistive technology. So it's really figuring out like my condition affects me in this way that makes it hard for me to do this work in this class. And so disability services as well as us can be helpful in thinking through like, well, what is the issue right now related to your condition that you need help around? So I would say, I would say reach out to your disability services. It's not too late to register, and thinking about how do you do this moving forward in other semesters when it's not feeling as rushed. So yeah, if all my exams could be in different weeks, that would be great. Why don't you go ahead and do that? So when we're thinking about requesting accommodations, it's not it's not like that. So when we think about helpful accommodations now, I don't always say that extended timelines for assignments is helpful, because sometimes when you have more time, all you do is have more time, right? So if I told you the deadline is tomorrow, and then you're like, oh, I can't get it done by tomorrow, and I say, okay, get it done by next Friday at 3, what sometimes happens is that you wait till Thursday anyway, right? So like sometimes extended time only means more time and more procrastination, or like delaying what you have to do. But I think under COVID, that's a little bit different, right? Because everyone's ability to be productive has diminished. And I think that is one thing that people aren't necessarily talking about, which is like once you go home and you stay home and it becomes everything that is your life, like your productivity decreases. So thinking about, well, is extra time what I actually need? Do I actually need more time on exams or to submit papers? So thinking about how this extension of time could be helpful for you. We think a lot about assistive technology, because that is something that I think is underused. So thinking through like, well, what type of technology would be helpful for me? Is it a time management strategy or an application, or is it an organization app, or do I need help like writing papers or visualizing papers? And there's some good assistive technology elements for that. So I think one of the things that I've heard most from the college students that I've supported, I've experienced I think everyone's experienced this issue with writing. But if you ask someone, like, what are you struggling with writing? You're like, I just can't organize my thoughts. I can't get it done in paper. But then when you ask them to talk about it, they can tell you the paper beautifully and really well organized. So one of the things that we encourage people is use the talk to text option. Even if you don't get accommodations, this is like an amazingly helpful way of approaching writing a paper. It's always easier to edit than it is to create. So if you talk to text, then email it to yourself, cut and paste it into a Word document, then all you have to do is go in, kind of like clean up the organization, change that funny word that was auto-corrected or that was blended, kind of do some restructuring, and that's a really good start, right? So like starting your papers in that way isn't necessarily an accommodation. Lots of people do it, but there are softwares that allow you to do that. You have to train the software, but it's thinking about like what is the actual barrier Is it that, it takes me longer to do things? Well, then you need longer to demonstrate the material. It's really hard for me to learn visually. And now all I have are PowerPoints to look at. So I need some type of discussion-based content. So thinking about what are the actual issues helps the disability service folks to identify what's the actual accommodation. So in thinking about accommodations, that could be one place that you start. There's a really good resource that we'll post. Boston University has accommodations for school. It's out of the Center for Psych Rehab. So you can either Google search those terms, or perhaps you can plunk their PDF or the website into our chat function. But that's a really good place to kind of start thinking about what could I ask for? Because things have gone virtually, there's some things that you may not be able to ask for. But when thinking about well, is my school getting creative with remote accompaniment or coaches or tutors? So are there ways that there are supplemental folks that can jump on Zoom and help you structure your day, or provide tutoring and being able to finish up, a particular type of lab? So thinking through what are the things from disability services? What are the resources from campus? Some campuses are more resource rich than others, and others struggle with resources. So really thinking about what can you get from your school, and being able to ask and advocate for that is really important. So we have some resources that we wanted to share. On our website, you'll be able to find a list of resources that we put together for providers. A couple of weeks ago, we did a webinar for providers. 1,600 providers registered for the webinar. The webinar was specifically for college students with mental health conditions. So providers want to help, right? We had tons of colleges and administrators join that call. And so people want to be helpful. So figuring out what kind of help you need, I think, is incredibly important. The more specific you can be, I need this type of help, the more helpful they can be. So on our website, we created a list of resources about how to develop a to-do list, how to manage electronic files, how do you set up a space at home. And so we put these things together so that providers could be more helpful to the college students that they were serving. So you can go on there and find the resource. If you have a difficulty time finding it, let us know. We can send it to you. But some of the things that we're thinking about is helping students to actually have language to advocate for themselves. So it may be easy for me to say, one, because I'm old and I've been a student for a really long time, it feels like forever, is that it's easier for me to write an email to a professor, being kind and sweet and empathetic, and then advocating for myself in a way that they are interested in helping. Not everyone has that skill set. And remember, I told you I was a vinegar person. I didn't always have that skill set either. So we thought that maybe if we provided language to students, it would be helpful. How do you engage your professors, or how do you ask for something from a professor? How do you advocate for yourself with the chair of your department or the dean of your school? How can you help? How can you, articulate yourself to student government so that they can advocate for more students? We had heard that some schools don't have a pass-fail option for students, and it seems as if that is a very hard decision to make, that students have to go for academic grades at a point where they have been upended and uprooted. So thinking about how do we align ourselves with student governments to advocate for the student body, and then also how do we introduce ourselves to disability services to get the ball rolling. So in addition to what we currently have, we also then have some things that are upcoming that may be helpful. So please, in the future, hopefully we'll have these things up by next week so that they can be helpful for folks. We also have a list of resources and websites for people related to like how do you manage anxiety, what are some wellness strategies. So we have a list of resources for college students that is a Google sheet that would be helpful for some. So go check those out. If you're thinking of anything else that would be helpful, drop it in the chat function because we really do want to be helpful. So before we move on to the question and answer, I think one of the things that was the most helpful thing that someone told me this week when I was saying, I was like, I'm struggling. It's just a lot to be able to finish the semester under these types of conditions. All of us have different conditions. Some of us have it harder in trying to manage our home life. And well, I did say earlier, no one's hard is harder than someone else's hard, but some of us have more complicated situations at home. But one of the things that he had said to me was, don't give up, just keep adjusting. Like you're learning as you go. And I think that that was super powerful for me because you sometimes think that it's a failing on your part that you're having a hard time. But really, this has never happened before. So we're just adjusting to our what's happening, right? So like we're not failing. We're just trying to figure it out. So a couple of steps, right? 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but like trying to figure it out. So be kind to yourself. I often say, like, if you wouldn't say it to your friend, don't say it to yourself. So thinking about, like, would I use these words like, oh, man, you suck, you can't do this? Like, you probably wouldn't tell your friend that unless you were, like, really busting their chops. But thinking about, like, how to talk to yourself kindly during this time. We've all been through hard things before, and we've gotten through them, and this too shall pass. So being able to not think about how long it's going to go on for, but like we just have to get through the semester, get through this, like really keep it as segmented as possible. But you got this. We can finish the semester. I want you guys to feel as if you have the support of people that don't know you and that you don't know. But if you need anything, please ask, and we will try to be as responsive as possible. So with that, we can do this. I'm going to turn it over to questions and answers. And I think Amanda is going to be joining me. This is our website, just as like a quick note, but why don't we move over to some Q&A?
Awesome. So thank you, Michelle. Again, thanks everyone in the audience. I know we've been having temporary tech challenges and people have been going in and out in audio. We will be sharing this webinar. Dee just reposted the area where you can find all of these things. Michelle, the question and answer session, despite all of the tech issues, has been blowing up. We have lots of really good comments. So I may share some questions with you, and as I share them, I might also share some of the comments that have been coming through because we just have had such an active audience, and I really appreciate all the amazing comments and input people have been adding. So something that's coming up a lot in the chat is how to communicate and negotiate with school administrators regarding suffering academics and how to speak up, especially when fearful of stigma. So a couple people commented, how should students deal with professors who are non-responsive, meaning they're not willing to change or give extensions? As much as some people are being accommodating, how do we deal with those who aren't yet?
Well, I think that these are really timely questions, right? So I think one is I sometimes fall on the side of it's probably more helpful to describe what your struggle is as compared to disclose your condition, so how it's affecting you. I do think that like the easy entry of like, we know that this is hard for you. I know that I'm one of 1,000 students that's contacting you. Like really try to put yourself in the professor's shoes, as hard as that may be. But start with the empathetic message, which is like, I know I'm one of 300 of your students and one of many that are reaching out. But I think asking is the important part of the advocacy component. I think for people who are already registered with disability services, this is a little bit easier because you do have a built-in advocate that is intended. So for those of you who are not registered now, and this may give you some pause in registering in the future, you don't actually have to get accommodations or assistive technology to register with disability services, but it's a way of protecting students who have a condition that may get in the way of accessing information. So as a note, so thinking about like how do you craft the email, I think there's also language that we may want to consider in our templated language for you guys about making the distinction that you didn't ask for that. You don't say, I didn't ask for this. That sounds kind of pushy, but like COVID has put us in this position where we're isolated from the people that we love, where, you know, there are so many things happening per day, like hundreds of thousands of people are dying a night, that this is an unprecedented time that is often very difficult to be able to manage solely your academic expectations during this time. So there's a way that you can craft the argument that it takes it out of this is me asking you for something that I need because it's an individual need versus like this is what's happening in the world and this is the student perspective. I do think that some professors are more flexible than others, and I think that focusing on who is your advocate. So if you have a great professor in the past, reach out to them and say like, how should I do this? Or if you have a really good advisor, reach out to them. But I think it actually goes up the chain, right? So that you ask for what you need. If that person doesn't respond to you, you send it out again. Hey, I know that you're super busy. I know this is like a really hard time, but just recirculating this to the top of your inbox. I was wondering if we could set up a time to talk about this. So if a professor ghosts your request, then you resend in a kind way. If the person doesn't respond to your request on the third time, then you reach out to the chair of the department. I'm just really concerned. Usually this person is super responsive, but, you know, they haven't responded back to me. And so I was just wondering if, you know, if there was another way to get in touch with them. So being able to get on people's radar, but not cause a lot of ripples, I think is one of the things that we want to consider. For those of you that want to take an incomplete, I would argue that the incomplete clause is adequate. So the incomplete clause in most schools is something that is, you know, a big event that was not anticipated, that was highly disruptive. And usually people use an incomplete for like a death in the family or something like something terrible that happens, car accident. But COVID is a terrible thing, right? And it is highly disruptive and it is outside of your control. And so I think one can argue that if you want to go for an incomplete, that is something that you can look at. I would say go to your school student handbook and look at what it says about incompletes, and also look at your syllabus to make sure that the language aligns. For those of you who have an active student government, being able to put this on their radar. If you have professors that are not being helpful, there may be other things that you could do. So just be mindful that you don't have to be the only student or feel like you're the only student complaining, because you're not. Amanda, I don't know if I answered all parts of that question.
I think you did. And I think a follow-up comment came through that someone would love a comprehensive document to help them with this, because it's really a challenge, especially as someone who's a first-generation college student in navigating these emails. And so to remind everyone, we definitely are going to post this. Some folks have already been real excited and tried to find it, but it's not probably going to be posted till next week.
There.
They're very proactive. I love this audience.
I love
it's not
you
there
guys.
yet.
I'm telling you. Any of you college students who are interested in the advisory board, come. Yes. So, you know, it didn't occur to me that it would be helpful to do this. Otherwise, I would have done it earlier. But when we were talking to our young adult our college student advisory board, it became clear that like just having the language, right? Like being able to say like, oh yeah, that's a really good way of saying it. Like I adopt people's language all the time because I'm like, oh, that is so much more effective than the way that I was articulating myself before. So we do want to help you with this, and we will be working on it because we do think that it would be a helpful resource. For all of you that already went to those blue fits, I'm sorry to disappoint you. Sorry to disappoint you, but we're going to work on it.
So, Michelle, another comment came up with regards to communicating with administrators or academic professionals and the fear of stigma or self-sharing. And someone's comment was they find it hard to communicate their needs with academic advisors because they feel like they're hiding behind a debilitation. They got recently diagnosed and feel like maybe they're faking it. And is there any advice for managing the fear of speaking up and the discomfort of talking about your mental health with getting your needs met?
Yeah, no, that sounds like a very difficult time. So I appreciate you sharing. I think that it is a very difficult thing to do. And I think that mental health conditions are often stigmatized in ways that other conditions aren't, right? Since it is not visible, some people do think that someone is faking, which is a terrible thing to have to address because it both makes you feel bad for yourself. It also makes you feel bad about the other person. So one of the things that we try to do in services in HYPE is really think about like, well, how does this condition affect me? So in like clinical language, we call that the functional implications of a condition. So if I have bipolar condition, it affects me in these types of ways. And those could be like what people would call like your symptoms, right? But then you think about like, well, how does that actually affect my learning? So does it get in the way of me being able to concentrate, for me being able to like sustain focus, for my ability to read and comprehend information in a fast or slow period of time? So does it reduce my processing speed, as they would say? So thinking about like, how does it affect you? And what I would argue that you then do is say like, you know, you may not know a lot about this, but this is a website that can tell you a little bit about this condition. But really, this is how it affects me. So I usually don't do the condition component. I really just focus on like, I've been diagnosed with a condition that affects my ability to do A, B, C, and D. If you are not already registered with a disability services or accessibility services, I would highly encourage you to do that because it also takes out the conversation between you and your professor or your advisor in those ways. So the cool thing about disability services, it varies a little bit from campus to campus, but you present this information to them and you verify your condition. But then after that, they kind of take over. So you register, they accept you, and then they send a letter either through you or through email. I like the schools that send it through email because it takes this kind of rub between the student and the advisor or professor out of it. And they send a letter to the professor saying like, this student is a qualified student under the ADA, and they should receive, or they need to receive, these accommodations for this semester. And then they are legally bound to provide those to you. So if you're not registered already, do that, because what it does then is you don't have to describe your experiences to your advisor, that they don't have to believe you, that disability services is actually telling them that you have a condition that qualifies you as a protected student, which I find to be helpful, especially because professors or advisors can say really mean things, not intentionally, right? Like, and I mean, I guess sometimes intentionally, but most of it is like they say things without thinking and not understanding the impact on students. And so while I think mental health stigma is changing, I don't think it's changing fast enough that people can have not be guarded about how they describe their experiences, because often with mental health conditions, it also cycles, right? So like sometimes you need accommodations or additional flexibility and sometimes you don't. And so this idea that you're always affected in particular ways may not actually be true. It may be true in some ways, but not in all ways. Amanda, I'm not sure that answered the question. What was the actual question?
I feel like you did. It was hard finding a way to communicate needs with academic advisors and other on-campus professionals without fearing hiding behind a debilitation or feeling like you're faking it, and kind of the advice, which I
Okay.
think you really touched on.
So, and what I would say then also is, especially now because this is easier, you don't have to, nothing's face to face, is you write an email. So write the email saying like, just so that, I wanted to share that these are the things that I struggle with. And those are just the things that make it difficult in class. You don't share the condition, you don't share the symptoms. Like, I struggle with these types of things. And I try to do these things to compensate for them. So you make yourself, not make yourself look like, but that you show as a student that you're proactive, you're interested, you manage the things that you can manage, but that you need a little bit of assistance in these types of ways. So that also could be some language that we put in, some advocacy, or at least like explanation language. So I would say like, hey, I just wanted to send a note to let you know that I'm struggling in this class. I've recently been diagnosed, or whatever the situation is, identified that I have some underlying conditions that have been affecting my ability to do X, Y, and Z. I try best to manage these things by doing A, B, and C. However, I still need a little bit of help, and this COVID situation isn't helping, right? And so these are the types of things that will be helpful for me moving forward in this class and being able to finish. I really love this class. I think that you're a great professor. I'm really engaged in like the content, and it's helped me so much to think about blah, blah, blah. So please let me know what you need from me, but otherwise this would be helpful if we could either have an online discussion or if you need to speak with me in person. So I would kind of craft a message like that. So, and that way you're not feeling the stigma because you're not saying anything, but you're asking what you need and telling them how you're managing things. So professors and advisors really dislike it when people ask for things, but they're not doing anything on their own to kind of solve their problems. So for those college students that are thinking like, oh, I just got to ask what I need, you also want to say what are the things that you really like about them, or what you really like about their course, what you're getting out of it, and that you're trying these things on your own. Some of these things are helpful. Other things haven't been as helpful. This is an unprecedented time. We're all trying to figure our way through this. So being able to share how you are trying to manage on your end goes a long way on the professor's end and the advisor's end and anyone's end, honestly. So if that's helpful, please let me know. You
Yes,
have
thank
another
you.
question, Amanda? Yes.
I do. I think we have time for a couple more. So that going in a bit of a different direction, folks asked
Okay.
about creative tips for maintaining motivation. And something that really resonated with me is someone dropped a comment in relation to that saying, it's the start that stops most people. So how do you get past that
Oh, it's
hump?
the start.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I know. It's so hard. I think that sometimes it's just sheer brute force. Right? Like you just gotta force yourself. But sometimes you just don't have the will to force yourself. And so this is where I think like that gap, like group accountability plan of starting is really helpful. I also think for papers, the hardest thing to do is to open up a blank piece of paper with no words on it and then think this blank piece of paper is going to turn into, 15 pages of all words. And now you have zero. So I think that those things really make people stop, or trying to sit down to do stats and you're like, I have zero idea about what this question is asking me, right? Like I have no idea. So these are the types of things that I think are helpful for students. Totally, even if you don't struggle normally with writing, if you're having a writing block, text to type. I mean, voice to text, just talking to your cell phone, right? Open up your notes or open up an email to yourself and just throw up, right? Just start talking about whatever the topic is. It is so much easier to edit than it is to create. And then send that to yourself, cut and paste it, put it in a Word document, and it gets you started. Now there's words on the page. Now you have a start. So that is super helpful to me. And I encourage all people to try that if you have a hard time starting. So that's just with the starting of the task. Like if you have no idea what to write about, that's a totally different thing. Like get creative, ask someone, Google it, right? And then talk to text. So for doing things that you don't know how to do, what I found to be helpful, so let's say you have a stats problem set or a calc problem set that you have to do, is cut and paste the question into Google and then find YouTube videos that will help you to do it and do it a parallel, right? So have a YouTube video going, your problem set in front of you, and trying to figure it out. There are lots of people who are post really amazing YouTube videos for math related stuff, because often professors or TAs struggle with communicating in ways that all people understand. So I do not underestimate the power of YouTube in helping, because it is really particularly helpful. So this group accountability plan, this is like a coaching model, right? Like this is why people hire personal trainers. This is why people go to Weight Watchers. This is why people join groups. It's that there's an accountability approach. But now that we're no longer on campus, you don't have that kind of built in, right? You don't say to your roommate, all right, I'm going downstairs to the study room and I'm going to put in 3 hours and I'm going to come back up here. Someone comes looking for me, telling me you don't know where I am, right? Like, so we don't have that right now. We are either bombarded with people that we don't want to be around, or around people that we love that we can't escape from, or we're home alone and we desperately want to be around other people that we later want to escape from. So like all our situations are different, but we don't necessarily have all those natural supports in place. So figuring out like how do you get those things? I've been trying to think like, can Hike do something in that type of way that people can like check in with us for group accountability in the morning, and you know we send some nice messages. So I'm trying to figure out like, is there a way that we can fill this void? But if you don't have people, I think that's probably the hardest thing. If you aren't connected to anyone and thinking through like how do I like create a check-in. And for those folks who feel like particularly isolated, I would say like give us a shout and maybe we can do some thinking about like what could be helpful, because there's nothing worse than like trying to finish your semester and feeling like you're all alone and that you don't have the support. You also want to be able to check out your campus to see if they're doing any virtual study sessions or like recreating the coffee shop. Like at my school, students used to go to Pret and sit and just do their work, you know, like, so recreating a student union virtually. So look to your college campus too to see if they're doing anything cool, because there may be some things. I'd also say a little Google search could go a long way with that. But initiating is really hard. One thing that I can say though is once you've initiated successfully, like once you started, you feel so much better, like a load has been lifted off of your shoulders. So then a little bit of success goes a long way. The next day you can start something new. So one of the things that you may want to consider on your to-do list, if you had a success with starting something and you also have other things that you need to start, put it close to the next day, right? So like I don't know, what's today? Today's Thursday. So let's say tonight I sit down to do my policy class and I have to write a paper and I feel like I can actually do it. I do something. I would actually put a new task tomorrow of initiating a new one, because getting started is hard. But like if you go on your previous successes, it actually becomes a little bit easier. It's like ripping off the Band-Aid. That's the worst part.
I love that.
Amanda, once again.
Oh, go
Yeah.
ahead. No, we had two
Nope, go ahead.
good sharing. Someone suggested using a Facebook group of your friends to do live study groups. And then someone else said that their school was offering Zoom tutoring and other services. So to check out, like you had suggested, what your school's doing to turn things virtual, because not as many folks are aware, but they're starting to post these on their websites. So we only have.
And so the other, so Facebook is good. The other option, I went to Google Hangouts the other day. So there are some good free ones that you can like send around to folks. And Google Hangouts also has captioning. So should that be helpful too for some folks, whereas other technologies don't have that? You can see and also caption at the same time. Okay, sorry, go ahead, Amanda. Only have
Oh,
time
that's
for
okay.
one more, is that what you said? Yeah.
Yes, I think I can do a real quick question. Any last minute tips for relaxation and anxiety reduction? Someone said they dropped out in
Mm.
2012 because of anxiety, and it's really important to find balance and serenity. Someone in the audience suggested Googling the wheel of emotions if you struggle to figure out if you're feeling anxious or what your emotions are to identify them. But they were looking also for tips in anxiety reduction.
Oh, I love that. So what a great idea about the wheel. Thank you for the participant who added that to the discussion. I think one of the things is to take a couple minutes and just make a list of the things that make you happy. And it doesn't have to be something that you've tried before, like maybe something to try, right? So for me, submerging in water is really helpful. So when I'm super stressed out, really anxious, I have to draw a bath, right? So being able to submerge in hot water is therapeutic for me. For some people, it's baking. One of my girlfriends in my program, she's like, I get stressed when I bring in muffins, and there had been a lot of muffins, so like maybe trying something new, but make a list of and ways that you can like completely, or at least really a lot, like remove yourself from your current situation, like to be able to find serenity. We have a colleague that is all work all the time, and he found that watching cooking shows was really relaxing, and then cooking was really relaxing. So a little bit of exploration may go a long way. I've always found the Great British Bake Off to be terribly relaxing. I don't know, maybe it's the British accent. Maybe it's because they're so kind to each other. I don't know. I can't say. But I think that like thinking about like what are the ways that you can disentangle the super stressful life of being a student, because arguably it is one of the more stressful things that you can do. If you're taking 5 classes, you have 5 bosses who don't talk to each other and also don't care about the other people's workload that they're assigning to you. So this is the hardest thing you'll ever do, and you're already doing a great job. You're here, we're almost done with the semester. So figuring out like how you disconnect and how you manage every day, I think is like incredibly important, especially during this like really kooky and terrible time. So if you guys want anything in particular, I know we're probably over time, but if you think that there would be something in particular that's helpful for you, please leave in the chat for us. We are thinking about doing additional webinars, either in broad topics like today, or in deep topics like, management of emotions, or time and task management, or initiating tasks, or how to start a paper. Like any of those things are fair game. So please leave any comments that you think would be helpful. I just want to say thank you for your time, and thank you to my amazing team for doing all the things to get all these webinars up and running. I appreciate you guys. And Amanda, is there anything else that we should say before we wrap up?
I think the only thing I would add is that everyone should get an email after this with access to our website, which will be posting the GoToWebinar audio recording, the transcript, all of the resources we're talking about, and we'll be developing more resources. So if you're struggling to find us, also just Google Transitions ACR and we'll pop up as one of the first links. And thank you again for being such an interactive and engaged audience. You're getting lots of thank yous in the chats. The PowerPoint
Oh,
video
thank you.
the PowerPoint video will be available. So you'll have the audio, the video, and the associated links for the folks that just asked.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming.